Great. Good afternoon again. We are delighted to be joined by our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed. Sitting on her right is Naveed Hanif, as you know, the Assistant Secretary General in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. And sitting on her left is Shari Spiegel, the Acting Director for Financing for Sustainable Development, also in DESA. They are here to present to you the 2024 Financing for Sustainable Development Report. So without further ado, I will give the Deputy Secretary General the floor.
Right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. It is really a pleasure to present the 2024 Financing for Sustainable Development Report. Many thanks to all those involved for the huge amount of work that has gone in to producing it. The report is truly the international system speaking with one voice, the result of collaboration between more than 60 international agencies through the Interagency Task Force on Financing for Development. This kind of cooperation for us is vital, and because of this, the report sets out we face what I think we can say is a serious development crisis, a crisis with finance at its heart that requires an immense amount of international effort to try to turn it around. That effort's got to start now, or it is for many, many countries game over. There are just 6 years to go till 2030. Multiple global shocks mean the Sustainable Development Goals are now worryingly off track. At our current rate, we estimate some 600 million people will still be living in extreme poverty beyond 2030. And as the report shows, finance is the crux of the problem. First, there's a major financing gap. Task Force members have estimated an additional $4 trillion will be invested every year to 2030 to have a chance of achieving the SDGs. And this is up from an investment gap of around $2.5 trillion a year before the COVID pandemic. Second, developing countries have no space to maneuver. Their borrowing costs are high. That 3.3 billion people, around 40% of humanity, are living in countries that are spending more on interest payments than on health or education. In 25 developing countries, more than a fifth of tax revenue goes on servicing external debt. And as countries struggle to service their external debts, attention naturally turns to efforts to increase domestic tax revenues. But in an increasingly digital, globalized economy, resource mobilization is really hamstrung without intensive and inclusive international cooperation to define how to uphold tax norms. And this is evidenced by the ongoing presence of tax havens and illicit financial flows. On the third issue, the global economy is not supporting investment and development as it should. Average growth rates have steadily declined over the last 25 years, from over 6% before the global financial crisis to around 4% today. Developing country exports have slowed too. Between 2000 and 2008, they grew 15%. Since then, they've increased just 3%. And domestic policies are also blocking progress. Fossil fuel subsidies rose to a new high of over $7 trillion in 2022. So we urgently need a surge of investment for our sustainable development agenda. But as the report sets out, that relies on fundamental shifts in the global economy and in the public sector leadership. And it urges action in 3 critical areas to make that a reality. First, scaling up public and private investment in the SDGs themselves. This is why reforms to the development bank system are so important, with more capital and multilateral and national development banks can provide hundreds of billions in new resources for SDG investment, and all of this at more affordable rates. Donors also need to make good on commitments on ODA and climate finance. In 2022, only 4 countries, Germany, Luxembourg, Norway, and Sweden, met or exceeded the 0.7% goal. That's got to change. Official development assistance has increased, but increasingly it's being spent within the borders of donor countries. It's not supporting many of our developing countries, and history is witness to the powerful role external public financing can play to enable countries to recover from wars or other crises. Such support, we still underscore, it's not charity, it's investment in our shared future on one planet. And public finance is also critical for bringing the cost of capital down and thereby leveraging private investment. And this is what we're calling blended finance. We need public money to incentivize private investment that has a real and veritable impact on sustainable development. Private finance also brings technology and entrepreneurship, which are key to any society's development, and we can see that moving in many of our emerging economies. Second, we must remake the international financial architecture. You've heard the SG say this a lot, and it is a feature of the Summit of the Future. Our current system, set up in 1944, no longer fit for purpose. I think most people and things at 75 years would have lost their shelf life. Yet it's still determining the conditions for investment. So we have to increase the voice of developing countries in global economic governance and improve the architecture for the debt crisis resolution. Third, leaders must close the credibility gaps. Countries, especially the G20, have made many promises on global governance reform, on aid delivery, and on introducing domestic reforms to tackle corruption and inequality. And that includes gender inequality. Yet progress has been insufficient, and as a result, faith has been eroded in multilateralism, and that really does threaten us all. Geo-economic fragmentation imposes significant costs, and inaction on global challenges means a much more dangerous and less prosperous future for us all. And we're seeing those frustrations where stability, we've been unable to keep that, and conflicts are just continuously multiplying in many of the countries that we're serving. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the title of this year's report is Financing for Development at a Crossroad. And truly, we are at that juncture. Without rapid attention, urgent attention to getting financing flowing, the 2030 agenda will fail, and there's no question about that. So this report urges us to make the most of the significant opportunities ahead, and they're still there. The Summit of the Future in September needs a high-level political commitment to major reforms. And the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development in 2025 will need to agree the details of that. We'll need countries to commit to specific actions to transform economic and financial systems that deliver on sustainable development. The message of the 2024 Financing for Sustainable Development report could not be clearer. We must choose now, either to succeed together or we will fail together. And we say, for people and planet, its people's failure is not an option. And really happy to take questions with my two colleagues here on the report. And this is, of course, messages that we'll be taking into the spring meetings next week as they address many of the issues, IDA replenishment, debt, energy, Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First question to Sherwin Bryce, please.
DSG, Mr. Hanif, Ms. Spiegel, thank you for coming to speak with us on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association. I'm Sherwin Bryce, Peace South African Broadcasting. You mentioned, DSG, that predictable financing is at the crux of the deficits we see in terms of implementation in the SDGs. You also mentioned the remaking of the international financial architecture, which is key. You led a high-level delegation to Washington in January. You met with leaders of the IMF, World Bank, and other multilateral institutions. Where are those discussions in terms of, the 500 billion you require every year in terms of the stimulus that the SG talks about? Where are we in terms of the reform of the international financial architecture, the debt relief that developing countries need to be able to spend more on things like health and quality education?
Well, Sherwin, we're not in a good place. In January, we really thought that we could build the momentum towards an opportunity at the Summit of the Future where we would raise the ambitions on the international financial architecture, but we were also talking about what we can do here and now with the SDG stimulus. And that hasn't really taken off. I think the sense of urgency and the scale at which we need to bring additionality to countries, address the debt relief or debt distress crisis in many countries through the common debt framework, not working, not meeting the demands that are required. I attended the G20 meeting not long ago, and I think strikingly there was that is becoming more and more two worlds, a world where it is judged that perhaps in succeeding with some of the macroeconomic fundamentals, it's okay, and there's a soft landing, and we can celebrate that. But for over 4 billion people, it's a crash landing. And this is really, really becoming evident in many governments that have to choose between whether they spend on health or education or they're servicing debt, for which, yes, debt was taken for good reason, but debt today, the inability for people to pay as a result of the interest rates that are very high and solutions that are not there from our multilateral institutions to do so. So this is where I think this report is very important because it provides the evidence there to show us that if we are not getting together to solve these solutions for the global south as well, then there will be this fragmented world where the poor get poorer and the wealthier are shielded from the reality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Al-Nadi Satima, Al Jazeera English. I'd like to follow up on Sherwin's question and build on your response. And so, obviously, you mentioned that the common debt framework is not working, and there seems to be all eyes on the lenders at this stage, right? And so my question is, what buy-in do you have from the lenders who are holding what seems to be the keys to this debt crisis? Are you hoping that they forgive the debt? Are you hoping they restructure the debt? And if so, have they indicated that they will? Because it seems like all the financial indicators out of the COVID pandemic recovery seem to show that the developing nations are getting richer, and as you mentioned, poorer nations are getting poorer. And so this figure of, I think what you said is that 600 million will still be in poverty after 2030. How do you get the lenders to buy into what is obviously very necessary?
I think the persistence of showing the evidence behind the implications for this, I mean, it has to be more than just a technical discussion. And bringing to life that this is people's lives. I think the first time we've been able to show that, there is no expenditure on health and on education. Why would you expect that those indices would improve if you're using that for debt servicing? I think the lenders have to be brought to the table. The spring meetings are another opportunity for us to do it. The G20 is an opportunity for us to keep pushing this. I think the persistence at which we do and do not allow them off the hook to try to get something going. But as we said, the framework for bringing them to the table and getting the results just doesn't work. I mean, I think we've said this more than 2 years now. 3 years for Zambia to wait to get a deal. In that 3 years, have we counted the number of lives that have been lost? Have we counted the number of lives that, in fact, have been, again, your maternal health indices, the children that could have gone to school that have not gone to school, an economy that could have given more jobs and seen less people go across the borders? I mean, these are real issues that people are dealing with. And maybe we've not done as good a job to do that. But I think this report puts a lot of evidence up front and begins to show that picture of that there is a development crisis. This is not just a financial crisis, but the impacts of it are in people's lives. And the repercussions will be felt around the world. We are connected. And where you have a dissatisfied constituency of young people, you can be sure today with technology and with everything else that allows them to be mobile, that there will be instabilities that we could avoid if we would just invest in development, invest in peace. I mean, it's shown over and over again that's what works.
Thank you. Abdul Hamid?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mohammed. I have a question on development, and maybe if you can accept a political question. So this is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi, and you know that the world economy had been hit twice, the pandemic followed by the Ukraine war, and the poor countries paid a heavy price for both setbacks. How is the recovery? How do you evaluate the recovery from both the pandemic and the war on Ukraine, especially with the grain initiative had been canceled as well? And then I have a question, if you want to answer, about Gaza, but if I don't have to impose my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, since COVID and Ukraine, this is what we're saying. The recovery has not happened. It's happened for one part of the world and not the other part, and we're celebrating the recovery in some parts of the world, but it's actually gotten worse. And before COVID, before Ukraine, we were not meeting the SDGs. And no investments, less investments, more burden on states, no fiscal space has meant that they've done less on the development agenda. So, you want to say in some countries you have some progress, but I think overall we're flatlining. And until we have a bolt that goes into that and resuscitates us, it's not good. And I think that we have to impress upon people that this is not just doom and gloom. The solutions are there. The political will that we need and the commitments are available. They're there to us. And I think that that's what we need to be pushing for and finding the arguments and the leverage to make that so. I think in the SDG stimulus, we have shown how that can be done. With the capital increases for MDBs, we have shown that it is possible for us to take 100 billion SDRs and give them to multilateral development banks that are existing vehicles that we know work for us, and make that happen. But there is inaction, and that's causing a lot of pain, a lot of distress, and a lot of crisis.
Thank you. Do you want to take a question?
I will always attempt any question.
In fact, my question to you personally, I haven't heard from you, Mrs. Mohammed, about the genocidal war in Gaza. You were, I don't want to characterize, but I was looking for a statement from you or a speech or something to say about Gaza, but I didn't find it. Why?
Well, Amina Mohammed is the Deputy Secretary General. And I think you'd have seen me retweeting everything that the SG has said, and I'm fully behind everything that he said. It's really important for us to hold fast to what is right on a personal level, and I don't know if I have I have the luxury of a personal statement to make, but I will say that for me of great concern is that we have lost our moral compass on Gaza as a humanity, as the international community, and we need to do something about that fast. We're late. There are thousands of children that continue to lose their lives, that live amputated. There are hundreds that we are waiting to come home, hostages. I know well about hostages that have been taken. I come from a country where Boko Haram still has thousands of hostages that we have lost and have not had recovery to. This is painful for the families, and we have to have that resolved now. But let me just say, finally, that what the SG says, I say. And I believe in it, and I believe that today his leadership, without it, we would be in a worse place.
Great. Any other questions? Oh, Sherwin, of course.
I mean, let's link Gaza to the SDGs, right? I mean, I think that's often lacking between these geopolitical divides and how they imperil the development agenda. So to speak to that, I mean, the quality of education in Gaza, the lack of adequate sanitation and water, food, poverty is rising. I mean, this is imperiling everything you're trying to push here today. You can point to various conflicts around the world. So how important is resolving these geopolitical, intractable conflicts so that we can all be on the same page in terms of implementing, the targets in these 17 goals?
It's really provocative, Selwyn. I mean, is there a
Only
Gaza?
it was Selwyn.
Sorry, Selwyn, Sherwin. Is there really a Gaza for the SDGs today? When the war happened in Syria, we went back 40 years on the MDGs. That was the days of the MDGs. We've lost a generation of SDGs in Gaza as of today. And I think that that's what we have to think through, is that how you deal with the SDGs in Gaza. I mean, the Gaza of yesterday is not the Gaza of today. The SDGs that we had hoped for in Gaza, and I'll say we did. We had agencies and our people working very hard with partners in Gaza, and there was hope. Hope came through UNRWA and education. Hope came through some of the activities that young people were able to get engaged with, and that they were connected digitally so that they could be part of the world and see that at the end of their aspirations that they could achieve them. But today, no. And I think that this is rights denied, and as I said, we've lost our moral compass. We do not see Gaza and people. We see a war, and that's not acceptable. That's just not acceptable. So for the SDGs, we'll always continue to live in hope. We've still got 6 years. Maybe we can have a ceasefire tomorrow, and we can begin to rebuild. But it is more than just rebuilding infrastructure. These are people, these are histories, these are communities, these are lives, these are generations. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.